gas exchange system in mammals. So mammals are quite large organisms, and large animals with high metabolic rates will have a small surface area to volume ratio, and therefore they'll require large amounts of oxygen for respiration. They'll need lots of nutrients, and they'll also produce lots of waste product like urea or carbon dioxide. So therefore large animals have evolved adaptations and developed systems to facilitate material exchange. So they've got a circulatory system which connects specialised exchange surfaces with the rest of the organism. Got a ventilation system which brings in oxygen and removes carbon dioxide. And they've got specialised exchange surfaces like alveoli in the lungs, or villi in the small intestine, or gills in the fish. So this is the structure of the mammalian lung, or the human lung. And yeah, a lot of the things that the features are the same as what you'll learn at GCSE. So here we've got the larynx, which is the voice box. You've got the larynx. You've got the trachea, with rings of cartilage which strengthen it and keep the airways open. So the trachea is the main tube, the main air pipe or windpipe. You've got the trachea, that then divides into two bronchi. The bronchi then further divide into even smaller bronchioles, and then these bronchioles will end in tiny little air sacs called alveoli, which is the site of gas exchange. And then you've also got, here is the diaphragm. You've got the heart. This, because you've got to imagine that the diagram is yourself, this is the right lung, so that's the right lung. And then these white bits here are the ribs, and then in between the ribs you've got intercostal muscle. You've got around the lungs, you've got pleural fluid, which is contained by the pleural membranes. So the pleural membranes keep the pleural fluid in place, and the fluid just basically lubricates the lungs, so when we breathe in and out it doesn't scratch against the ribs, because obviously the lungs are quite delicate structures. So larynx, cartilage rings, trachea, bronchus is one, or bronchi for plural, bronchiole, alveolus, diaphragm, heart, the right lung, pleural membranes, intercostal muscle, pleural fluid, and rib. So you also need to know that now that there's two types of intercostal muscle. You've got external intercostal muscles, which are the ones on the outside, and then you've got internal intercostal muscle, which is the ones further in. So now we'll look in more detail at the alveoli. So the alveolar epithelium are surfaces over which gas exchange takes place. And epithelial cells are partially permeable, which allow oxygen and carbon dioxide to diffuse through them. So you can see here this diagram of the alveoli. Carbon dioxide will diffuse out of the plasma into the alveolus, and then oxygen will diffuse from the alveolus into the blood, to the red blood cells. And you can see that deoxygenated blood is brought to the capillary, to the alveolus, and oxygenated blood is taken away from the alveolus. And at this point here, you can see that blood enters with a low concentration of oxygen and high concentration of carbon dioxide. When it leaves with a high concentration of oxygen and low concentration of carbon dioxide. So, alveoli have a large surface area to volume ratio, and to increase the surface area for diffusion, the alveoli are highly folded, and they are also numerous. There are many alveoli, and they are each wrapped with many pulmonary capillaries. They also have a thin surface to shorten the diffusion distance. The alveoli wall is only 1 cell thick. Blood capillaries are close to the alveolus wall, which means it has a short diffusion pathway. The alveoli cells are also flattened, and the capillary walls are only 1 cell thick. Remember that the thinner the surface, the shorter the diffusion distance, so more molecules can cross the surface per unit time. There is also a constant diffusion gradient. So to maintain a diffusion gradient, blood carries oxygen away from the lungs and brings blood plasma rich in carbon dioxide from respiring cells. And lung ventilation brings in oxygen-rich air and removes carbon dioxide-rich air. Remember, the larger the difference in concentration, the greater the rate of diffusion, so more molecules cross the surface per unit time. And the last thing is that red blood cells are actually slowed as they pass through the capillaries, because they're actually squished slightly, they have to bend slightly. So the red blood cells are slowed as they pass through the pulmonary capillaries, which means there's more time for diffusion and more molecules diffuse per unit time. So you can see that oxygen diffuses from the alveolus into the blood. Carbon dioxide goes from the blood plasma into the alveolus. And key things are that the walls of the alveolus and capillaries are only 1 cell thick, so they have a short diffusion pathway. Deoxygenated blood here is brought to the alveolus in the blood plasma via the capillaries. And oxygenated blood is taken away here from the alveoli by the red blood cells in the capillaries. And alveoli have a good blood supply with lots of capillaries wrapped around them, which maintains the diffusion gradient, because oxygen-depleted blood is constantly brought to the alveolus, and oxygen-rich blood is constantly taken away from the alveolus. There's also a ventilation mechanism which brings oxygen into the alveolus and takes carbon dioxide away, again maintaining that diffusion gradient. Alveoli are numerous and have a grape-like structure or highly folded structure, which provides a larger surface area, increasing the rate of diffusion.